Chair, we're live now. We can start the meeting.
Thank you. Good morning and Happy New Year to you all. Welcome to Teignbridge District Council's Virtual Planning Committee on Tuesday, the 19th of January 2021. I am your chair, Mike Haynes. All participants here are taking part remotely and the committee is being viewed online and recorded, so please bear this in mind throughout the meeting. In the event of a break in the internet connection or a power cut, please bear with us as we try to reconnect. If we are not able to reconnect after 15 minutes, the meeting will be adjourned and reconvened at a later date. Please check the committee page on our website for further details. Please make sure all microphones are muted when you are not speaking to avoid any background noise levels. Please keep your points short and do not interrupt when someone else is speaking. If you wish to comment, please raise your electronic hand and wait to be called. All councillors have been sent the agenda for today's meeting. Any members of the public who want to view the agenda can do so by visiting our website, teignbridge.gov.uk. I will now start the committee by doing a roll call of everyone here present. When you hear your name, please confirm by saying present. Chris.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Bradford.
Present.
Councillor Bullivant.
Present.
Councillor Clarence.
Present.
Councillor Colclough.
Present.
Councillor Hugh Cox.
Present.
Councillor Goodman Bradbury.
Present.
Councillor Haynes.
Present.
Councillor Hayes.
Present.
Councillor Jackie Hook.
Present.
Councillor Mike Jeffrey. Councillor Kurzweil.
Present.
Councillor McGregor.
Present.
Councillor Nutley.
Present.
Councillor Nuttall.
Present.
Councillor Parker.
Present.
And Councillor Patch.
Present.
Thank you, Chair. That's
Thank you.
everyone.
Okay, thank you. If I could just introduce the officers who are here with us today. There's Ros Eastman, who's the business manager for planning. Planning officers, we've got Anna Holloway and Arta Kagula. Tree officer, Mark Wadhams. The solicitor, there's Suzanne Walford. I think Paul Woodhead may also be attending. And from Democratic Services, we have Chris Morgan and Trish Corns. Okay, first item on the agenda then is apologies for absence. Do you have any apologies, please, Chris?
There's no apology, Chair.
Thank you. Item 2 is the minutes of the previous meeting, which are attached to the agenda. Is it your wish that those are signed as a correct record? Yeah, I saw Averill's, Councillor Kurzweil and Councillor Nuttall proposing and seconding. Does anyone wish to say anything? I got a hand raised there, if I could just check on that. It's Councillor McGregor. Do you wish to say something, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. It was just to highlight that within the minutes it says that application 20/01252 Trinity Nursery, Teignmouth, was to be referred to deferred until the next committee meeting. I noticed that it's not on this particular agenda, and I was just wondering whether or not we could ask the officers for an explanation.
Well, obviously,
Other than that,
the minute perhaps should have said to a future meeting, but I mean, there may well be issues that haven't been addressed yet. I'll ask Ros Eastman to comment on that, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it's simply the fact that the concerns were, or the representation was received from our colleagues in Waste so late in the day in relation to the timing of the committee agenda, and then with the Christmas break and the timetable for hitting this committee, it simply wasn't able, we weren't able to get a response and have that considered by all necessary parties in time. So we are still working on that, and we'll bring it back to committee as soon as we can.
Okay, so I mean, I would suggest that we amend the minutes to a future meeting rather than the next meeting, and then that covers that point. Would the mover and seconder be happy with that? Avril and Giles, yep. Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Right, can I ask them to save us spending a long time, a show of hands? Those in favour, please, can you raise your hand? Okay, that looks a clear majority. Were there any against? Okay, so that's carried. Right, that's the minutes of the previous meeting. Item 3, declarations of interest. I know of a couple, so members indicate, please. I'll go through the list as they're appearing for me. Councillor Nutley.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, application 20/01853, car wash at 128 was a personal interest, as I know the applicant, and enforcement 20/00150 ENF Chardonnay to Woodland. Obviously receiving emails and also knowing the chairman of the council through being a board member.
Thank you. Councillor Bullivant.
Application coming in 20/02/097, 27 Powderham Road. The person who lives next door to his property is a personal friend. So for that reason, I won't take part in the discussion on that particular item.
Thank you. Councillor Bradford.
Thank you, Chair. After discussion with the monitoring officer, I would declare an interest in 5F. So I won't be speaking or voting on that agenda item.
Thank you. Councillor Patch.
Thank you, Chair. After hearing previous interests, I wonder if clarification could be forthcoming about interest in terms of knowing an applicant, because I do know one of the applicants, but not on a sort of close personal level, and indeed not sort of seeing them sort of very often at all. But I don't understand that as falling under an interest to be registered. Perhaps we could have some clarification.
Okay, well, I'll ask the solicitor in a moment to comment on that. My view has always been, if it's somebody you socialise with, I always remember it being described as someone who you would visit their house, perhaps for meals. That type of level of socialising is the rule of thumb I've always taken. Can I ask if our solicitor is able to comment, please? Suzanne, I can't see on the screen.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, if it's a contact that others might be if it might be seen to be a close. It's your call, but you need to consider what it might look like to others.
Okay, in that regard, then I think it's probably prudent if I were not to take part in the item on the car wash.
Okay, thank you. So declaring an interest in that one.
Yes.
Right, that's the end of those people that have indicated that they wish to declare an interest. So if we could take, if Councillors Bradford and Patch could take your hands down, please. Electronic ones. Okay, nobody else. Right, if we move on then to item 4, public participation. Firstly, I can advise that there are members of the public who have asked to speak on all of the applications from B onwards. That's the car wash one, and for the rest of those. But the other item that I wish to raise at this point, I think the reasoning will become clear to you shortly, is that I want to vary the order enable us to bring forward item 6, because the officer Ros Eastman will explain to this. There is a request for this one, both the enforcement items, to be deferred. Now, given that there are people who are ward members who may be wishing to speak and waiting for that until later in the meeting, and there are members of the public who are wishing to view that, then I think that needs to be taken now so that committee can make a decision on whether to defer the 2 items on enforcement for the reasons that Ros Eastman will outline. So can I hand over to you, please, Ros?
Thank you, Chair. It's a fairly straightforward, well, from my perspective, it's a simple request, really. Following the publication of the agenda, we received legal advice that it would be in the best interest of ensuring the robustness of our decisions in relation to the two enforcement cases, that they should both be withdrawn from consideration at this committee. We are actively working on next steps and on bringing them back to committee if they need to come back at the next feasible opportunity. But there is a change in our recommendation for each of them, that they should be withdrawn from the agenda at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'd move that those two items under enforcement are withdrawn from the agenda. Is that seconded, please?
Seconded.
Yes, Councillor Goodman Bradbury seconded. Were there any questions on that? Let's just see what who's got their hand up. So I've got Councillor Nutley.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, obviously I'm disappointed that this is not coming up for enforcement. I mean, I did ask the question yesterday when it came in at a very late stage of why it was being deferred or recommended for deferment. Because my question was, because of the, especially with the Chardonnay one, you know, because of the work that is still going on by the owners of that property, you know, what enforcement is being taken so that they don't continue with any work in there.
Thank you. Can I ask Ros Eastman to come back? Can you turn your volume up slightly, Ros? I don't know if it's at full already or not.
Sorry, I might just need to move my wand, see if that's any better. So particularly in relation to Chardonnay, the reason that one was coming to committee was in relation to our scheme of delegation, which suggests that when we're dealing with enforcement matters relating to residential occupation, it needs to come to committee. That doesn't stop us from continuing with enforcement action in relation to other matters at the site, but we do need committee's authority to make decisions in relation where a decision could potentially make people homeless. So that's not the reason for the deferral. It's simply in relation to legal advice that we've received, but there is nothing that should necessarily stop us, apart from clarity of enforcement processes, from taking enforcement action in relation to other matters at that site at the moment.
Thank you. Can I just explain to other members of the committee that ward members had been given advance notification of this because obviously the effect it may have had on their attendance at the meeting, so that they were aware this was coming up. Councillor Colclough.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yes, I had points to raise on this because I wasn't totally happy with the recommendation. The things that I thought wanted adding. So will that come back to the committee so that we can make these points?
Yes. Ros Eastman, do you want to comment?
As I've just said, in relation to specifically the residential use of the site, any unauthorised residential use of the site, that is something that does need to come to committee if we want to take action. So at the moment, there's no intention to not bring these matters both back to committee as soon as it's feasible. Okay,
thank you. Right, so we'll need to take a vote on this. I moved that these items be, I can't remember what the expression was. It wasn't deferred. It was it withdrawn? I honestly can't remember which wording was used.
I said withdrawn from today.
Yeah, that's what I would have used then. Thank you. And that was seconded. So can we go for a vote on that, please? If I ask Chris to do the roll call, please.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Bradford.
For.
Councillor Bullivant.
For.
Councillor Clarence.
For.
Councillor Colclough.
For.
Councillor Cox.
For.
Councillor Goodman Bradbury.
For.
Councillor Haynes.
For.
Councillor Hayes.
For.
Councillor Jackie Hook.
For.
Councillor Jeffrey.
For.
Councillor Kurzweil. Councillor Kurzweil.
For.
Councillor McGregor.
For.
Councillor Nutley.
Against.
Councillor Nuttall.
For.
Councillor Parker.
For.
And Councillor Patch.
For.
That's carried, Chair.
Okay, thank you. I had the dustbin collection going on outside, so I'm muted for that bit. Right, hopefully it's gone away now. Thank you. So that's carried. So we move on now to item 5, which is the planning applications for consideration. First one of those is application A. There are no public speakers. That's the one in Powderham Road. So I'll go straight over to Ros to go through the presentation on this, please.
Thank you, Chair. Chris, I'm sorry, could you make me co-host, please?
Yep, sorry. Try now.
Thank you, that's working. Lovely. Just rearrange my windows. Okay, can you see my screen, please? Somebody just quickly confirm for me.
Yes.
Yes,
I can.
absolutely.
Lovely,
Yes.
thank you. So this application is before you today simply as a result of the fact that the owner of the property, the subject property, is a member of staff here at Teignbridge. So the application seeks permission for, sorry, apologies, seeks permission for a first floor balcony to the rear of the property and a change of the window from a window to a French door, as it says on the presentation that's in front of us. So if I can just quickly take you through these slides, you can see that the property is a long, narrow plot, the plot in question, and this is on Powderham Road. The front of the property faces south towards Powderham Park, and we're looking at a balcony on the rear gable here. So there is a reasonably considerable separation distance heading to the north of the site. There we are. So the existing elevation, you can see here, it's a relatively narrow gable extrusion out the back with a single-story log store underneath, and the window at the moment is quite tall, it's quite long, and you'll see on the photograph shortly that underneath the mirror, the window, there is an area of infill at present at the moment, UPVC infill in place. The proposal is that the window would be replaced by a door, similar proportions in terms of its width to the existing window, with a balcony with glass balustrading underneath. It would extend out the back of the gable by 2 meters, so it's a reasonably sizable balcony, but still considered to be acceptable and in proportion. And there's the other side. The red arrow here shows the location of the balcony on the rear of the building, and you can see in this image the extent of windows on the gable ends of the properties on either side at the moment, and also the existing balcony. So there is an existing level of intervisibility between the properties at the site, and on balance overall, officers don't consider that the proposed balcony would lead to any unacceptable additional overlooking or intrusion of privacy of the neighbours. So the recommendation on this one is one of approval. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So there's no public speaker, so we can go on to the ward member on this one, which is Councillor Bradford, I believe.
I'm quite happy with that, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Right, well, as members are aware, it's only before us because of the fact that it's due to being a member of staff. So anybody else wish to speak? If not, I'll move the recommendation as set out, which
I'll second.
Thank you. That was Councillor Parker. Thank you. So the recommendation is as on under item 2 on the first page of the written report. Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Nobody else has indicated they wish to speak. So can I ask Chris, please, to go through the roll call that permission be granted. So can you indicate for or against permission being granted? Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Bradford.
For.
Councillor Bullivant.
This was one he was going to declare an interest in.
Thanks, Chair. Councillor Clarence,
4.
Councillor Colclough,
4.
Councillor Cox,
4.
Councillor Hayes, Councillor Hayes,
Can't seem to get his, yeah, he's voting for, he can't get his microphone working.
4, sorry. Just couldn't unmute then at the time.
that's no problem.
I'd like 4 for that.
Councillor Hook,
4.
Councillor Jeffrey,
4.
Councillor Kurzweil,
4.
Councillor McGregor,
4.
Councillor Nutley,
4.
Councillor Nuttall,
4.
Councillor Parker,
4.
Councillor Patch,
4.
Councillor Goodman Bradbury,
4.
and Councillor Haynes.
4.
That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. So that's carried. Permission is granted as in the recommendation. Right, moving on then to the second item, item B, the car wash at 128 Ashburton Road. We have one public speaker on this one, that's Paul Parker. Can he be admitted to the meeting, please? And then I'll ask Ros to give us the presentation. Right, I can see that the supporter is present. Ros, can you start, please, presentation?
Yes, of course. Thank you, Chair. Just pick the right screen. There we go. So the application that we've got before us today is an application for a variation of a condition in relation to the way that the car wash at 128 Ashburton Road currently operates. The suggested change is that the opening hours would extend by an hour at the beginning and end of every day, Monday to Saturday, and by an hour at the end of the day on Sundays as well. There is an objection to this from my colleagues in Environmental Health, and as a consequence, the recommendation is one of refusal. We think that the impacts would be unacceptable on the surrounding properties. This is obviously an area that's subject to quite a lot of change at the moment. You can see from this plan here that there are the new houses at the start of Chirkenbridge Road, just in close proximity, and that there are dwellings as well to the rear of the sites. Our environmental health colleagues are very concerned that any increase in noise from the site would be unacceptable, and they therefore are supportive of our recommendation to refuse this one. Thank you, Chair.
Right, thank you. We can go back to the normal screen. Right, we've got Paul Parker, supporter, please. Would you like to speak for the 3 minutes that you have?
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Yeah.
Sorry, it's
That's okay. 3 minutes will start when you start giving your speech.
yeah. Thank you, Chairman and members. I've been asked to speak to you by the operator of the business as I'm the owner of the premises. The car wash has been operating those hours since it was moved from the back of the site to the front in 2011. It appears that the previous owner, who applied for the permission to move the car wash, he also applied for the car sales at the same time. He informed me that he believed the operating hours that he put on the application form were for the new car sales element, and that the car wash hours of 7 till 7 p.m., 7 days a week, approved in 1993, would stay the same, as it was only being relocated within the same site. And this seems to be an administrative error. Issues only arose from one person in 2016 after the new houses were built opposite. A single objector has stated that noise is an issue. However, the car wash is located on a very busy road and was already existing business before all the houses were built. In fact, the garage has been on the site since the 1930s. Following advice from the Environmental Health, the business owner has lagged the pipe in to prevent any rattling on the steelwork, rehoused the pressure washers indoors with insulation and has turned down the pressure on the hand washers to help mitigate the noise. There is currently a live planning application on this site for a convenience store that would operate from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. 11 p.m. 7 days a week, approved by the council last year after officers recommended approval. The noise of the comings and going, including large delivery lorries unloading crates and cages, were not deemed to be an issue with that application. There are 2 other car washes that have been approved by officers in residential areas in Newton Abbot since this one was approved. Both use the same process involving pressure washers and are located the same distance from residential dwellings as ours. These are H2O by the hospital opposite the flats and at Millbus, surrounded by houses. They have operating hours of 8 till 6 and 8 till 8, 7 days a week respectively. The hour before and after people finish work are crucial to the business times. Being unable to compete on a level playing field with the other car washes by having crucial hours reduced would make the business unviable, particularly in these very difficult economic times. There are 5 families that rely on this business for their income. Newton Abbot Town Council had no objection to the Monday and Saturday opening hours of 8 till 6, but would like Sunday to stay the same from 9 till 4. The operator and I would be willing to accept this recommendation as an alternative, as a suitable compromise, and the officers have been informed of this. Thank you for your time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I've got a question arising from that. The supporter sent me a copy of the speech yesterday. So I looked at the 1993 application and decision notice, as it was mentioned in the speech. I didn't see any reference on the application form to the hours that were ended up being approved then. But on the decision notice, it did say 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. So if I could ask Ros, please, to clarify what the position is with that, because I know I've spoken to her about this already. Ros?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so I've had a look at the planning history on this one, and from what I can see, the 1993 permission relates to a completely different scheme of redevelopment of the site, with a car wash facility placed to the rear of the site and even screened within some kind of housing, maybe like the jet wash at Sainsbury's in Newton Abbot. So it's a completely different set of circumstances, and that planning permission, from what I can see, has never been implemented. It's a different building on site. So whilst that is the hours that were approved on that scheme, that's not relevant to the history that we've got here. We have a constrained site now with concerns from our environmental health colleagues regarding noise, that there would be potential some more complaints and possibly even statutory nuisance concerns if the opening hours were allowed to be any longer. In relation to the amended hours, environmental health would continue to object, as they consider that any additional noise at this site would not be acceptable. And members may recall that we applied a series of conditions to the convenience store planning permission for the site regarding background noise levels, delivery methodologies, the type of deliveries that can take place and when they can take place. So it's not strictly true to suggest that there were no noise concerns related to the convenience store proposal for this site.
Thank you. Right, if I could go on to the ward member now, please, Councillor Bullivant.
Thank you. This particular site has been in operation for many, many years, and it's been used as a garage, a forecourt, various operations, including as a car wash for many years. And all of these operations predate the building of the new estates that now surround it. I have a problem, therefore, where you've got an existing business making or operating in the same way that it's done for many years, suddenly being constrained into what it can do because we've allowed building to take place around it. Equally, I recognise that the application that came forward for a commercial development that was approved last year had operating hours that would allow vehicles to come and go at significantly longer hours than those that the applicants are now looking for. I also note that the people using the site have suggested an amendment of the hours that they would be happy to work with, which would restrict some of the hours. And on that basis, I'd be perfectly happy to accept their amendment and recommend that this application gets approval. Thank you.
So you're moving approval with the
I'm moving
variation
with the
in
appropriate
hours
amendment. Yes, that's
that were
correct.
described. Thank
Yes.
you.
I'll second
Okay,
that, Chairman.
It's been seconded by Councillor Parker. Right, thank you. I've got 3 people to speak now. Councillor McGregor.
Thank you, Chair. Just bear with me 2 seconds. I've kicked out of the system. In terms of the Environmental Health Department being consulted on the planning application, they commented that the statutory noise nuisance complaints received in 2017-2018 haven't continued into 2019-2020, which would suggest perhaps that the efforts made by the applicant, to reduce the noise, appear to have rectified the issues that the environmental health officer was concerned about, because there was no further issue raised there. In terms of the and in fact, they specifically relate to the adjustments that have been made by the applicant for those noise complaints. So from my perspective, I think I'm more than happy to follow Councillor Bullivant's lead and recommend that this is approved with the hours adjustment as stated by the supporter.
Thank you. Councillor Nutley.
Thank you, Chair. I think everything's been said that I was going to say. I mean, I totally agree with Councillor Bullivant and Councillor McGregor. I mean, like we were saying, the garage has been there since the 1930s. And I mean, the road is very busy, gets heavy lorries going through there in any case. But, to have just, 2 letters from the same household seems to be rather strange that nobody else has come forward to object to this application. And like we were saying, that should it become a convenience store again, the hours will be from 7 to 11. You will be having, as the applicant mentioned, that you'll be having lorries coming in there, probably early hours of the morning maybe, to unload their goods, to do that. Personally, I have no problems with this in being approved. As I say, I totally agree with what Councillor McGregor said about the statutory noise on that. I don't really think there's an awful lot more I can add on this. As I say, I totally accept what people have said, but just to have 2 letters and to say, personally, I mean, I wouldn't want to drive into Ashburton and have to drive right the other side of Newton Abbot to have my car washed when I can get it just within coming into Newton Abbot. So totally agree with the other speakers, and I will be voting to approve this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hook.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to make a couple of points and then maybe ask a couple of questions or clarify a couple of bits of information. I know the car wash well. I pass it regularly, actually. That's on one of my regular sort of cycle routes that I ride. And so I can confirm it is a noisy operation, and it's popular and well used. But with, I can't vouch for how that sounds in somebody's house, so I wouldn't want to. That's not a scientific analysis. The fact that I think it's noisy when I pass by. And also, I was going to say, I don't believe the other 2 car washes that were referred to by the supporter are as close to residential properties. So the H2O car wash at the bottom of Jetty Marsh Road is not as near to residential properties as this one is. And equally, the Milber one isn't either. I know that one well. That's the garage I take my car to. And that is a quieter operation, the one at Milber. It's a different set of equipment. It is very quiet. I've stood near it while it's operating. It's not noisy in the same way. So just to clarify those bits of information, I don't believe it's unfair that those have different operating hours because they are differently located with regard to residential properties. But what I wanted to clarify was in relation to points other people have made. So regarding the fact that complaints don't seem to have been made to environmental health since 2017. I mean, is that because people gave up? They didn't feel that it was worth complaining anymore because their complaints hadn't been taken into account? Or is it because the owner has managed to deal with those noise complaints and they are no longer there? I mean, that I think we need to clarify, because that's an important piece of information. And equally, I was wanting to clarify, if this letter of consultation did go to all surrounding neighbours, then if there is ongoing feelings that the noise is too much, then it is surprising that we've only had 2 letters from one residential property. So perhaps can we clarify who was consulted? Was it all immediate neighbours? And did we not have a response from them? Because I think that does lead to my supporting of the proposal by Councillor Bullivant. Thank you.
Thank you. Right. Well, obviously, I'll ask Ros to come in a minute, and we'll go through what the conditions would be. I would be voting against approval, because I still see that if our Environmental Health Department have objected to this, then I would support that view. But I note that there are a number of members who are supportive of this. So if I could ask Ros to just clarify what the hours would be with the proposal that's before us for approval, and any other conditions. And then if I could ask Councillors Bullivant and Parker to if they're in agreement with that. Ros?
Thank you, Chair. So the hours that have been put to us as the alternative to those that were applied for are 8 till 6. Let me just make sure I've got this absolutely clear. 8 till 6 Monday to Saturday, and 9 till 4 on Sundays. That's the suggestion. That's what we're now, I think, being asked to consider. And Environmental Health have been consulted specifically on that. And they have suggested that they do still consider that it would increase the impact on neighbouring properties, and they're not happy. In their consultation response, though, the Environmental Health team did say that if we were going to approve this application, they would like to see the erection of acoustic barriers, and that's something that we've really struggled with in terms of advising the applicant previously, because the visual impact of any barriers that could be acceptable has been, from a noise perspective, has been unacceptable from a visual perspective. They would also ask that there would be no activity on site before 8 or after 6, and no machinery to be used on site before 9 AM. So it would be hand car wash only. And they'd also like the submission of a noise management plan. Now, we haven't worked that up into formal conditions yet. So if we were going to be approving this with those broader hours, then I would ask for your delegated authority, please, to work out what those terms would look like as enforceable planning conditions. So delegated authority to build the environmental health recommendations into enforceable planning conditions for the site. Thank you.
Okay, would that be delegated in consultation with the chair and vice chair and ward members?
If members consider that necessary, then yes, of course.
Thank you. Right, can I ask Councillor Bullivant first if you'd be content with the conditions that have been outlined?
Thank you. Subject to your additional comments about being involved in the discussion, yes, I am happy.
Thank you. And Councillor Parker, would you be content with that?
Yes, I'm totally happy with that, Chairman. Totally
Thank
happy.
you. Okay, so it's clear what Ros Eastman just said, and then it will be delegated in consultation with chair, vice chair and board members of those conditions relating to the acoustic barrier. Okay, nobody else has indicated they wish to speak. So the motion before us, it's been moved approval with the conditions just described by Ros Eastman. So can I ask Chris, please, to go through the vote on this?
Thanks, Chair. Can I just check quickly before the vote who's not voting on this item because they've declared an interest?
I think Councillor Nutley did. Was it Councillor Patch? Was it Councillor Nutley as well?
I declared a personal interest knowing the applicant, but that didn't restrict me from voting.
Right, okay. Thank you. Right, thank you.
Councillor Bradford?
Or
Councillor Bullivant,
For.
Councillor Clarence,
For.
Councillor Colclough,
For.
Councillor Cox,
For.
Councillor Hayes,
For.
Councillor Hook,
For.
Councillor Jeffrey,
For.
Councillor Kurzweil,
For.
Councillor McGregor,
For.
Councillor Nutley,
For.
Councillor Nuttall,
For.
Councillor Parker,
For.
Councillor Goodman Bradbury,
For.
and Councillor Haynes.
Against?
That's carried, Chair.
Thank you. So that permission's been granted with those conditions as outlined. Right, thank you. If you could see that Councillor, the public speaker has left, please, and then the next item we're moving on to is the Mulberry Street in Teignmouth. We have an objector to this one, so can we be sure that the objector has been admitted before we continue? Chris, can I confirm that the one that's the who are we one that's showing up at the bottom of my participant screen, is that the objector?
Yes, I believe so. Can I just check?
Please.
Hello.
Hello, Caroline.
Yeah.
Hello. Thank you.
Is that's Carol that's with us then, is it, Caroline?
It
Yeah.
is
Okay.
it's a very strange state of affairs, isn't it?
Right. Okay, if I could ask you to mute, please, again now, and then I'll go through the officer presentation, and then I'll be inviting you to speak after that.
Thank you.
Okay, so this is the land adjacent to 6 Mulberry Street, Teignmouth. So if I could ask Ros, please, to do the presentation on that one.
Thank you, Chair. This is an alternative application to one that members may recall from early in 2020 for 2 dwellings in Teignmouth on a site that is relatively close to the railway line and close to the town centre. Members will note from the update sheet a number of changes to the report where we erroneously and accidentally referred to the previous scheme, for which my apologies. But the scheme that we are looking to grant permission today is the one that's illustrated on this presentation that's before us now. So you can see that it's largely the same, or certainly very similar to the previous scheme. 2 dwellings, semi-detached dwellings fronting onto Mulberry Street, this time with a small gable to the rear. But what has changed from the previous scheme is that the scheme no longer includes a 3rd story or a room in the roof of the dwelling to the south of the site. It's now just a straightforward 2-story dwelling, and the gable end to the south. Apologies, my scrolling is jumping a bit quickly at the moment. The gable to the south no longer includes the 3 Juliet or the 3 tall windows and the Juliet balconies. So the scheme is a modified scheme compared to that that members considered previously. And members should be aware from having read the report that planning permission was granted for the previous scheme by the Planning Inspectorate at appeal. So this is from our perspective, sufficiently similar that there would be no reasons for refusal that would overcome the granting of the permission that was made by the Planning Inspectorate. And if anything, it would have a lesser impact than the previous scheme in relation to a number of the matters that were concerns of members, as that room in the roof has now been removed. Thank you, Chair.
Right, thank you. We can go back to the other screen. Right, thank you. can I then invite the objector, Carol Ann, to speak for 3 minutes, please? If you could unmute, and then the time will start when you start speaking.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Good, thank you. And thank you again for giving me the opportunity to object to the proposed development in Mulberry Street. I am representing numbers 1 to 4 Westcliff Heights and also 43 and 44 Parsons Street. Sadly, the owner of 45 is recently deceased. May I say that this is the 4th time I've now had to attend a planning committee meeting with regards to this development. And the developer again has made some tweaks to his application. This is severely affecting the mental health and well-being of the above residents, who are predominantly shielding because of their ages and because they're registered disabled. We're completely stressed out by this bombardment of applications, and it's affecting our day-to-day living. We appreciate that the developer took this to appeal despite the council rejecting his application. And this is just unfortunate. The tweaks that he has made this time are a little less incumbent on us, but however, I would still draw your attention to the fact that the town council unanimously recommended refusal of this development several times again, and they asked this to come under category B to the planning committee. We feel that the parish council know the area better than most, and I would please ask you to listen to them and reject this planning application. The 2 proposed dwellings will significantly still overlook 43 and 44 Parsons Street. And, you know, their light will be significantly diminished. Miss Pringle of number 43 is registered disabled and has a condition which will continue to deteriorate over the years. And she's extremely concerned about the lack of light and being overlooked. I would also add that previous extensions have been refused for number 44 and also 1A and 1B Mulberry Street, who sought similar permissions for that height. In our opinions, there is already significant overdevelopment in the area. Currently, there's a very large block of apartments being built on the site of the old job centre. There is some limited parking with this development. However, there are also 10 existing apartments in Clay Lane with no parking. There are 8 public spaces in Parsons Street. These are constantly full, and there is illegal parking at all times of the day and night. If you went there now, you would see that people were illegally parking. Therefore, the proposed 2 3-bedroom family homes, and these are family homes, will have at least 1 vehicle. And I feel like the assumption that development is in with reasonable walking distance to car parks, and that the occupiers could manage without a car, it's just unfounded. And my final point, or our final point, is that Parsons Street is a single road, vehicle road, leading directly to our access lane, which then narrows from 19 foot to 13 foot 6 and serves 4 properties. We have 5 vehicles and a mobility scooter. Access is required at all times.
Yeah, that's time.
Okay, can you wrap up, please?
Yeah, certainly. It's just that we are just concerned about the parking. Thank you.
Thank you.
The building, I should say. Sorry, I was confused.
Right, okay, thank you. Right. Now, we don't have a ward member present. There was previously a site inspection on this site for the earlier application, and I went on site. I didn't have any, I couldn't find any planning reasons at that time that I could see as reasons for refusal, but the committee refused it. The important point now is that it was approved at appeal, and as has been said by Ros, this scheme, if anything, is certainly no worse than in the eyes of those that would be unhappy with it than the one that has been approved at appeal. In fact, it is slightly improved, shall we say. So given that the size of the footprint and the heights and everything else are as before, I can't see any reason myself for refusal, and I will be supporting the recommendation. I have now somebody indicated to speak, and that's Councillor Hook.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I follow your reasoning. I don't know the site, but yeah, your reasoning is sound. In a previous application that would have more impact has been approved on appeal. But I was going to flag up the fact that this report, and something has changed, I think, since the last application, in that we now have a new carbon calculator that we should be applying to all new development, and that doesn't take into account now where the development is located as it did previously. The policy S7 must be purely satisfied by the building structure itself, and that I can't see anything in the report that refers to the carbon reduction of this development. So I'm just flagging that up. I can see all the reasoning, but you know, this is something we should now be considering. Every single property that gets built now should be fulfilling policy S7 with our new carbon calculator since October 2019. So I'd welcome a comment on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Ros?
Thank you, Chair. I think it's probably fair to say that in light of the previous permission on this site, that is something that has probably been overlooked by officers here. This is brownfield land with modern dwellings in a sustainable location. In terms of minimising the carbon generated by the development, you couldn't get much better just from a straightforward development of this nature. It's also important to note the differential between major projects which are required to submit the carbon reduction plan to us and minor applications where we are seeking to minimise the carbon footprint. So on balance and overall, I think that Councillor Hook is right. We need to make sure that that sentence is included, or the analysis is included in every one of our reports. I think applying a different set of conditions to this permission would potentially be seen as unreasonable by an inspector. And given the scale of the development, I consider that it's appropriate as it is.
Thank you. Councillor Hook, did you want to come back on that?
Yeah, I did. I mean, that isn't the correct analysis of the situation. Since 2019, every application that's submitted for development does need to satisfy policy S7 and EN3 according to our new carbon calculator, which does not take into account the location of a development. So that isn't the correct analysis. I don't believe it can be dismissed that easily. You know, we put these policies in place because we have a climate emergency, and you know, that's why I'm going to flag it up every single time without fail, I'm afraid.
Thank you. Councillor McGregor.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to repeat comments that I made on the application when it came and was refused the last time. There's a fundamental error in the way that this is being presented as a brownfield site when it's actually PDL, previous developed land, and it was quite some time ago. I mean, this is not a brownfield site that happened a few years ago. This is more than 7 decades ago. So from my perspective, I think describing it as brownfield land gives an impression that it's a bit of scrub land that can be easily developed. And the parking element still is a massive question. There are fundamental, I don't want to use the word dishonesty, but there is a fundamental mispicturing, if you like, of the parking situation in that area. There are no spare parking spaces in those streets at all. The nearest parking spaces are either poly steps or at behind the Blue Anchor. They are some considerable distance walking away from those particular homes if they're built. There is no, there's no kind of mentality nowadays for people not to have cars. People want cars. If you want to get to anywhere, you have to have a car. The transport system is not really that well integrated. So, the portrayal of it being, it's fine, there'll be parking, they can park in the car parks. The car parks cost money. People won't want to do that. So where are they going to park? They're going to park on double yellow lines and or in other people's parking spaces. And that's a fundamental mispicture that's been presented regarding the parking. And I actually think we didn't possibly present to the planning inspector a robust enough case for these for the refusal the first time round. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bradford.
Thank you. Sorry, I was just trying to unmute. I did go to the site visit last time, and the access to this piece of land is dreadful, absolutely awful. I'm just speechless that the planning inspectorate passed it, and there is overlooking, and I just think that all the reasons that Councillor McGregor just gave as well, the parking, so I wouldn't be mind to pass it.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Clarence?
Yeah, Chair, it's with heavy heart that I have to try and agree with you. If I were to vote against this and this council were to refuse this application, which I probably think we should probably be doing, would the council be deemed to be acting unreasonably in view of the inspector's decision to grant at appeal? Would this council be acting unreasonably and therefore be vulnerable to costs if we were to refuse this application? Could the officers answer that?
Okay, well, I thought you might have been making a rhetorical question, but I'll ask Ros or Suzanne to answer that one, please.
I'll take that one, Chair. Thank you. My advice would be that we would be very vulnerable to costs. The schemes are sufficiently similar. The circumstances around each of the schemes is sufficiently similar that reaching a different conclusion within months of receiving the decision from the inspectorate would be highly likely to be considered unreasonable by the planning inspectorate. You know, the circumstances haven't changed. There's been no material change in circumstances that would support a refusal of a scheme on this site.
Thank you. Councillor Hook?
Yeah, I agree with all that reasoning. I mean, yeah, I don't have a problem with houses being built here, and I think we have to bear in mind the planning history of this site and the fact that the site was given approval on appeal. So I don't have a problem with that. My only suggestion would be is that we defer so that we can have a proper look at how the development conforms to policy S7 and EN3. That would be my only suggestion, but I think it would be foolish myself to refuse this as it stands, considering its planning history. I mean, I'm happy to recommend that we defer in order to get a proper analysis of the carbon reduction properties of this application.
Well, I was going to move approval as set out, so I'm not about to second deferment, because I think that the explanation given and obviously the history of it from the recently approved one from the inspector, then I can see no other thing to do. So in the absence of anyone seconding Jackie, can I move the recommendation as set out, please?
I'll second Jackie.
You're you're seconding Jackie for a
Yeah, I'll
deferment.
second that.
Okay, so the motion is for a deferment. I'd move an amendment then that it be approved as set out. Is that seconded?
I second that.
Thank you. So that's seconded by Councillor Goodman-Bradbury. So those are the motions that we have before us. Nobody else has indicated they wish to speak. I think I've just got Jackie with her hand up again. Okay, so can we go to the vote? So we'll take the amendment first. The amendment is that it be approved as set out. So can you please vote for, against or abstain on permission be granted as set out? Chris?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Bradford?
Against.
Councillor Bullivant?
For.
Councillor Clarence?
Against.
Councillor Colclough?
For.
Councillor Cox?
For.
Councillor Hayes?
Against.
Councillor Hook?
Against.
Councillor Jeffrey?
For.
Councillor Kurzweil?
For.
Councillor McGregor?
Against.
Councillor Nutley?
Against.
Councillor Nuttall?
Against.
Councillor Parker,
Against.
Councillor Patch,
For.
Councillor Goodman Bradbury,
4,
and Councillor Haynes.
4.
Chair, that's 8 all.
Yeah, thank you. So I'll use my casting vote in favour of the amendment. So 4, so the amendment's carried. So the motion before us, and we'll have to vote again on this, the motion becomes that permission be granted as set out. That's the amendment that became passed. Can I ask Chris to go through the vote again, please?
Thank you, Chair.
Can you say that again, please, Mike?
Yes, the amendment was successful. It won on a casting vote. There were 8 votes each. It was tied, but I gave the casting vote in favour of the amendment. So the amendment, which is now the substantive motion, is that permission be granted as set out with the conditions that are listed at the top of page 20. Oh, I've lost it now. Sorry. There we are. At the top of page 25. So it's permission be granted with the 10 conditions listed there. Okay, so if you could vote on that, please. Chris will call your name. So it's permission be granted as the motion.
Councillor Bradford,
Against.
Councillor Bullivant,
For.
Councillor Clarence,
Against.
Councillor Colclough,
4.
Councillor Cox,
For.
Councillor Hayes,
Against.
Councillor Hook,
Against.
Councillor Jeffrey,
4.
Councillor Kurzweil,
4.
Councillor McGregor,
Against.
Councillor Nutley,
Against.
Councillor Nuttall,
Against.
Councillor Parker,
Against.
Councillor Patch,
For.
Councillor Goodman Bradbury,
4,
and Councillor Haynes.
4.
It's the same score, Chair.
Yep, so it's 8 votes for, 8 against. So I'll use the casting vote for, so permission is granted as set out. Okay, can we move on then, please? Can I ask the public speaker is moved to the waiting room, and if we could have the next 2 public speakers for the application D, Golden Sands in Dawlish, can they come into the meeting, please? So I think I can see both of them. We have the supporter, Ian Butter, and then there's Phillips KA, I believe is the objector. Is that right, Chris?
That's correct, Chair.
Okay, thank you. So this is the one at Golden Sands in Dawlish. If I could just bring up the screen myself. And what I forgot to ask the officer is whether this is a major or not in terms of the land, because it will be 5 minutes or the lesser amount. Oh, and I have got one to read out myself. There's a document that's been sent in from objectors from local residents, which I'll be reading out. So I presume this is a major if we've got people. Can I just have some guidance, please, from the officer? I forgot to ask this one, how much time overall we've got on each of those?
Yeah, there'll be 5 minutes each for the objectors or the objector and their statement, and then there'll be 10 minutes for the supporter in order to balance that out.
Okay, thank you. That's what I thought would be the case. That's fine. So we have the one supporter speaking will come second, but there's an objector in the meeting, and I have a document to read out from another group of objectors. Okay, so this is Anna going through this one. Hopefully Anna's there with us somewhere. Anna Holloway, yeah, there she is. Over to you, Anna.
Bring up the presentation.
I think you need to turn your volume up slightly, please.
Is that better, Chair?
Slightly. Okay, got the presentation.
Okay, so this is a proposal for the change of use of the land for the stationing of static holiday caravans, with the accompanying detail showing a scheme for 42 pitches, along with associated works, including groundworks with changes to levels, areas of hard standing, access road, and details of landscaping and the relocation of existing children's play area and associated equipment onto adjoining land at the Golden Sands and Peppermint Park holiday park in Dawlish Warren. So the blue line shows the wider holiday park, and the red line shows the area of the application site. We can see here the properties along Mount Pleasant Road, adjacent to the site, and the site in its wider setting with Dawlish Warren. We just go through to one of the closer shots. We can see the existing access road that runs through the site and the children's play area, which is to be located onto the land here. This is the indicative site layout, which shows the access roads. The details of the hard standing would be conditioned, as would the levels be on site, but we do have a cross section showing the properties on Mount Pleasant. The red line shows the existing ground level, and you can see how they're proposing to change the levels, and also provide this buffer of wildlife corridor / green space alongside between the statics and the dwellings on Mount Pleasant. This is the cross section running the other way. You can see how the site actually slopes from Mount Pleasant towards the north, and also from west to east. Showing the wider site layout. And this is the a bit of a run through of the site. This is the access in, and you can see the rear of the existing properties along Mount Pleasant Road, some of the existing statics on site, and these are camping pods which have been erected on the adjacent site. They're referred to as timber tents. They're temporary structures. This is the location of the proposed relocated play area, but this site does have a separate consent already in place from 2014 for touring caravans. So if we just run through the site itself, you can see that this is the play area to be removed. You can see the rear of the dwellings on Mount Pleasant there. You can see there the change in levels across the site and the existing access road that's within there. So there we have the hedgerows along the east and western boundaries, and there's an area of scrub along the southern boundary with the dwellings. You can see the difference in levels there. You can see the holiday pods on the adjacent site, and also the separate holiday park on the top of the hill. This is the existing Golden Sands Peppermint Park site here. At the moment, the land is used for recreation purposes, and obviously the play area. This is the existing hedgerow along the eastern boundary, and you can see these are the adjacent neighbouring holiday park. That's the play area which is to be relocated. So the officer recommendation remains set out in the report that permission be granted, subject to no objection being received from Natural England on or before the 25th of January in relation to the approach assessment, and the applicant entering into a Section 106 agreement to secure a habitat regulations assessment contribution in accordance with the joint approach for the ex-estuary SPA and Ramsar sites and the Dawlish Warren SAC, and the conditions are set out in the officer report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, if we could return. Right. Okay, I'll ask the other objector to speak first, and then I'll read out the one that's been submitted to be read out. So I think it's Kathy Phillips, please. If I could ask you to put your microphone on.
Good morning.
Morning. So you'll have up to 5 minutes from when you start speaking. Okay, over to you.
Thank you. This is a collective objection, points raised on behalf of the residents for Mount Pleasant Road, Dawlish Warren. The following points are reference to the National Planning Policy Framework and cross-reference with the local planning policy. These include S1 Sustainable Development Criteria, S2 Quality Development, S5 Infrastructure, S7 Carbon Emission Targets, S9 Sustainable Transport, S11 Pollution, S12 Tourism, S17 Dawlish, S22 Countryside, EN3 Carbon Reduction Plans, EN4 Flood Risk, EN6 Air Quality, EN8 Biodiversity Protection and Enhancement, EN9 Important Habitats and Features, EN10 European Wildlife Sites, EN11 Legally Protected and Priority Species, EN12 Woodland, WE11 Green Infrastructure, WE13 Protection of Recreational Land. The first heading is visual impact. First point, Dawlish Warren and the proposed field can be seen from Holden, Exmouth and all points up the estuary. Point 2, Dawlish Warren is filled with holiday parks, caravans and mobile homes, which is an eyesore with no consideration for local residents, with an already existing overpopulation of the area. The third point, overdevelopment leads to overpopulated areas. Local amenities and green space is already limited for the existing population in Dawlish Warren and Dawlish for such future developments to accommodate extra provisions, including access to health resources, local shopping space and recreational areas for individuals to undertake activity. The next heading is infrastructure, excess traffic and access to highways. First point, currently is a 20 mile per hour speed limit in place and not 30 mile per hour as noted in the highways report. Second point, access is limited to Dawlish Warren for excess development, with roads being congested with holidaymakers, roads being used to transport heavy vehicles, caravans, camper vans and mobile homes, damaging road surfaces and hedges, including Week Lane and access through Cockwood, which is narrow and safe for pedestrian use. The next point, more individuals to the area mean more transport and therefore will increase pollution and carbon emissions. The next point, current transport infrastructure already unable to cope, increased not only by Dawlish Warren but other developments in the locality. The next heading is risk of flooding and appropriate use of sewage and drainage systems. First point, already major surface water flooding with inadequate drainage systems in place. The second point, there is a coastal management plan in place to try and attempt to cope with the existing problem of flooding in the area. Third point, the smell of sewerage is prevalent within Dawlish Warren without adding to current poor management of systems. The fourth, water pressure is reduced, especially in the summer. The last point in that heading, following the initial application in 2018, testing had been undertaken in the summer at the highest points of the field, which has a natural decline. The next heading is ecology. The Warren is key part of the ex-estuary spa and Ramsar site. It is a National Nature Reserve, SAC, and site of special scientific interest. While there is financial contribution to the RSPB to ensure protection of surrounding wildfowl and birds, it's a great pity to lose the limited green space available where many types of birds roost and frequent. The third point, fauna are present in the field, including bats and badger. The next point, additional pollution and lack of green space force individuals to use the beach due to lack of green space in Dawlish Warren. The field is currently used for recreational use by an already existing park area, which is well used for dog walkers to exercise their dogs. The next point, importance should be given to the current overall management of the site. The park does not maintain the already existing maintenance within the park. This is apparent in the field and the close proximity areas to the field, including dumping of their rubbish. Next point, an increase in light and noise pollution will also impact and be problematic to permanent residents and the fauna. Next point, concern for the breaching of undeveloped coast. Next point, littering by individuals and general lack of respect for the environment in the field and local areas, current and ongoing issue. And it is inevitable that this will create further issue. The last point, lack of respect, inappropriate management and law abiding. First point, unauthorised road closure for Week Lane for 2 consecutive days without permission from the Devon Highways Department, therefore unlawfully blocking access to the Queen's Highway. This was investigated by Devon's Highway in November 2020. The next point, very recent development of 15 camper pods in the adjacent field where the proposed play park should have been allocated and was already used for tent and camper vans annually. In the summer, in 2020.
Yeah, that's time.
Okay, can you finish your sentence, please?
The air ambulance was called and had difficulty landing in the field due to lack of space, due to proximity of camper tents to land safely in a timely manner, and has remained consistently open during the lockdown period, and permanent residence has been even more evident as a result of ongoing restrictions in the past 10 months.
Thank you.
And the negative.
Right, okay, that's it. Thank you. 5 minutes is up. Okay, the other objection comes from residents, again, Mount Pleasant Road residents. They've asked for this to be read out at the meeting, so I'll read it out. Thank you for this opportunity to raise our concerns about the proposed change of use from greenfield stroke seasonal camping to the siting of 42 static caravans with associated roads, lighting and infrastructure. Point 1, we consider this to be overdevelopment. 2, Dawlish Warren already has over 2,000 static caravans. This proposal will potentially add nearly 13,000 further visitors a year, 42 times 6 times 50, wishing to access the beach and especially the nature reserve, as at high tide, at either side of high tide, there is no beach until beyond Groyne 3. There is no direct access to the country park where dogs are allowed. Point 3. This overdevelopment directly impacts on the adjacent special protected area and Ramsar site, an area of international importance for wildlife and a site of special scientific interest, SSSI, which is less than 500 metres away and as such is subject to special wildlife considerations above and beyond a fiscal settlement per unit in mitigation, which in reality in no way mitigates the loss of habitat. Point 4, the area forms a green flight path from the conservation area to open countryside and Holden forestry land to the west and is home to badgers, bats, foxes and wildfowl, contrary to the submitted ecological report. Point 5, present internet, water pressure and sewage problems encountered in the summer will be exacerbated. 6, the application contravenes the TDC local plan, policy S17, protection of wildlife sites, WE8, significant dominant effect on Mount Pleasant Road properties, Million Way, Shutterton Lane, the estuary looking south, Exmouth and Limstone. WE11, green infrastructure, sections A, B, C, E, F, G and H. EN2A, landscape protection, sections A, B, C and D. EN4, flood risk, critical drainage area. Soakaway testing was carried out between October the 4th and 8th, 2018, following a sustained dry and hot period with lower than average rainfall, creating a drier field subsoil and skewing results. Point 7, the application contravenes the National Planning Policy Framework, paragraph 117, preservation of habitats and ecological networks. Point 8, the application contravenes the Conservation of Habitats and Species Regulation 2017. 9, page 4 of the applicant's planning statement states a 30-metre separation stroke buffer distance from Mount Pleasant Road Gardens. However, only 20 metres is detailed in the Planning Committee report, approval condition 6. Why is this? The 30-metre distance should be reinstated. Point 10, As residents, we appreciate we own property in a holiday area, and because of this, tolerate antisocial behaviour, litter in our gardens, noise, music, bad language, haphazard road and grass parking, without this additional holiday accommodation directly adjoining our properties. So that was from other objectors. I can move on now, please, to the supporter, Ian Butter, and Ian, you have up to 10 minutes.
Good morning, Chairman, members. The National Planning Policy Framework makes it clear that proposed development that accords with an up-to-date local plan should be approved unless other material considerations indicate otherwise. You will have seen from your committee report that this development is in accordance with your adopted local plan. Therefore, the only matter for your consideration is whether there are any other material considerations that are of such significance that cannot be adequately mitigated. My client has liaised over the last 2.5 years positively with the various consortees, and there are no statutory objections to this proposal. Foul and surface water drainage, which I know over best part of 40 years dealing with this area, has been a serious concern and has been considered in some detail based on the drainage schemes agreed in relation to previous planning permissions on this site. The foul drainage design ensures controlled flows into the local mains in common with the remainder of the holiday park, so that there's no surcharging. Surface water runoff is also balanced through discharge to ground and then via systems of swales and ponds to ensure that flows are properly attenuated in accordance with current SUDS practice. These measures, which have been incorporated throughout the existing park and the adjoining Golden Sands Park, properly manage foul and surface water flows to avoid flooding and surcharging of drains. Some members may recall the substantial contribution made by the applicant concerning the Shutterton Brook improvement works some years ago, which have materially improved flood risk within Dawlish Warren as a whole. More importantly, the lead local flood authority has no objections. On the matter of ecology, the submitted ecological appraisal did not identify any significant flora or fauna habitats within and adjoining this largely open grass field. Nevertheless, appropriate ecological improvement measures have been proposed. The boundary hedges are to be retained and added to through buffer planting scheme, which will also help biodiversity and allow movement through the area. There are no arboricultural objections. And just to be clear, we also have a coterminous planning application on the Golden Sands site, which seeks to remove some of the old chalet rows and replace them with caravans. There was some concern over bats, which was confused with this application as well. Yes, bats use the area, I'm sure, as a flight route, but that won't be hindered by this scheme. And in fact, bat surveys have shown that there are no local roosts of concern. The applicant is perfectly content to make the necessary habitat mitigation contribution. They've done this in the past and up to date have contributed over £35,000 to this scheme in relation to other cases. Although this is an extension to an existing developed site, it's in a location that is self-contained in the landscape. It adjoins an area to the east that was previously approved for touring caravans, and as you will have seen from the photographs, it is actually overlooked itself by other holiday parks. Care has been taken in the submitted layout to ensure the development is separate from and appropriately buffered with the adjoining properties on Mount Pleasant Road. The roofs of the upper level of holiday lodges closest to these properties are set well below the vision lines of the north-facing rooms, as illustrated on the cross section that you saw. Your landscape officer acknowledges that the development will have no impact on the wider area. Holiday parks are an important part of rural business, and this should be supported. Issues surrounding Brexit and more recently the restrictions on holiday opportunities due to COVID have yet again focused attention on the home holiday market, which is, after all, the raison d'etre of Dawlish Warren in many ways. Based upon evidence from national research undertaken in 2019, the park, as currently developed, contributes some £37 million every year into the local economy. The proposed development alone will add a further £3.5 million per annum into the local economy through direct and indirect revenue contributions. This is part of a multi-pound upgrading of this holiday park and its adjoining park as part of a wider package throughout my client's portfolio. The park relies upon a wide variety of local businesses and creates over 80 employment opportunities for local people. In summary, this proposal is in accordance with your adopted local plan policy. The report before you indicates that there are no planning objections to this proposal that could not or have not been adequately mitigated by our discussions. As such, there are no other material considerations that impact upon the presumption in favour of granting planning permission, and I therefore ask that you support your officer's recommendation for approval accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. I can just advise members that after we've dealt with this application, then I will be having a comfort break for members, so that in case you're wondering, if you'd remind me, please, at the end of this one. I'm looking, somebody's nodding. Okay. Right, the ward members for this, I'll invite first. Then I see I've got another speaker. I know Councillor Wrigley has asked to come in and speak, and indeed it was he who asked for this one to go to committee. So I'll turn to Councillor Wrigley first, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for allowing me to speak. We've heard very aptly put from the residents many of their objections. We've heard some positive statements from the applicant here. First of all, I would like to remind you that this isn't a green field becoming caravan, so this isn't creating a business opportunity. This is changing one form of accommodation to another. Up until now, this has been used in the summer for tents and people camping out in the field. So it is already in use as business, so it will not be increasing the business, the people coming as much as one might imagine, but what it will do is change the nature of it. Can I firstly ask, in the conditions, all of the other holiday camp permanent caravan conditions ask for a register to be maintained. That is missing from the condition 4. So condition 4, I would like to ask to have the standard clause that the operator maintains a register that is available for Teambridge to examine, which every other park has. I know we don't always look at those, and we should be looking at those, and I will continue my campaign to have us actually call in those registers for all the camps. I know before lockdown in March, we were starting to take action over in Livermore because people were living in the caravans. Now, we have seen that significantly during the last 10 months down at Dawlish Warren. I have had phone calls from people living in the caravans saying, please, could we waive the conditions so they could stay there through the pandemic because they had nowhere else to go. This is a scourge of the area that we have to clamp down on. These caravans are fine for holidays. They are not fine for permanent accommodation, and they are often being used for that, and we need to prevent that. Why is that important? Well, it means that we don't know where vulnerable adults are. So, for example, in this time of trying to bring people to vaccination for COVID, we don't have an accurate record of where they are living. The doctors do not know where they are. They're not on the local rolls for gaining the funding for the doctors, let alone all the council services and everything else. I brought this before this committee for three main reasons. I believe this to be overdevelopment. I believe 42 caravans in the site to be too many. But more importantly, I believe the impact on the ecology and the flooding has been underrated. We've heard about the ecology report, the report that was filed with this application, which has been in progress for what, nearly 3 years now? So there's no excuse for it not being finished. The report covered largely lots of other areas within the park. It was a very half-hearted attempt to look at what ecology there is going on within this field. And the local residents have reported to me many sightings of badgers and owls and lots of birds and lots of other things, none of which have been accounted for in the ecology report. So I'd submit that that ecology report is insufficient and has been poorly done and is largely, as it states, a desk exercise with a one-day visit that actually focused on the newts in the ponds, which is entirely unrelated to this. My biggest concern is on drainage. It was stated by the residents that this is a critical drainage area, and it is. This is an area that is classed by the Environment Agency as a critical drainage area. That brings with it higher standards required for any development in terms of runoff on the fields. I don't see that that has been mentioned anywhere in the communications with the flood consultant at Devon, and nor do I see a finished plan. It worries me that after 3 years, they haven't finished the plan for how they're going to deal with the drainage. We know this area is subject to flooding. The more long-standing members of you might remember in 2000, we had next door Hazelwood Park, or Beechwood Park is the residential part of it is called, evacuated by helicopter because it was flooded up to 5 foot deep and people couldn't get out. That is an actual residential area where people have permission to live there all year round. So we have many more people. We don't know how many people are going to be there. If you look at where this site is, we saw the gradients. This leads directly down. I even saw one very worrying statement in the drainage documents that said they were going to pump their excess water into Hazelwood Park. That doesn't seem like a good idea when that area is actually under seawater level. It's under high tide level. That would be part of the mud flats if the railway wasn't there in front of it. If you look at the maps, you can see that that is naturally part of the mud flats, part of the shore. The local residents there will show you proudly the wall along Dawlish Warren Road, which used to be the sea wall before the railway was built. Not only is the flooding aspect concerning for surface water, but the sewerage aspect is concerning as well. I've spent the last 7 years working with South West Water, trying to get them to upgrade the sewerage. There are serious issues in that part of Dawlish. And this is about 500 meters away from the major sewage processing plant, which is just on the top of the hill opposite the name's gone out of my head, which is constantly smelling over the summer. We are working hard to get South West Water to acknowledge that it has a problem, but it has a problem. Putting an extra load on that in this area is not advisable and not going to help the situation at all. So given all of the issues, given that it is already a camping area, they might say, well, they'll move it somewhere else more convenient. Well, if it was somewhere else more convenient, they'd already be having camping holidays there. So this is overdevelopment. 42 caravans is too many. I would urge that this be reconsidered. A smaller scheme might well be acceptable, but this is overdevelopment, and this will make the local residents' lives misery. And by the way, the pictures that were shown of the overlooking holiday park is in fact another small residential area. There are a dozen caravans up there that are permanent residential in Oak Cliff Park, which is hidden behind the Blue Water Park. But those are the pictures that we actually saw. So that's not holiday makers, that's the more vulnerable residents up there. Please vote for adding the condition if you're going to pass this, but I would urge you to actually put this back for reconsideration to come back with a smaller site, which would be more appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, Councillor Goodman-Bradbury, you're also a ward member, so would you like to say a few words?
Yes, I would, but I kind of think that an awful lot of what I would like to cover has been spoken, so I'm not going to take too much time of members from that point of view. I share a lot of the considerations and opinions of some of the items that have been said. I understand the business case, of course, for Golden Sands, and I take the points and the addition to the economy. But I do share the concerns of the residents with the ecological report, the drainage, the sewage. But the size of the site and the amount of caravans that are looking to put into it, I do also concern myself with the holiday makers and the quality of the holiday that they're going to have. There's too many. They seem to be packed in. And with all the other concerns, with sewage, with water drainage, I do feel this is overdevelopment. And I ask members to consider that fact when they do look to vote for this site. I'm not going to take any other time up. We've already had a lot of speaking from that point of view, but I would urge you to consider and vote against this item. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McGregor.
Thank you, Chair. I do apologise about the unmuting. I poured some red wine on my laptop and it didn't like it. There are a number of things that kind of leap out, and Councillor Goodman-Bradbury has highlighted one, and the word I would use is shoehorned in respect of the number of units to go into that particular site. But the biggest concern for me, particularly as portfolio holder for the Sport, Leisure and Culture site, is the fact that we haven't actually asked the Rangers for an opinion either. Dawlish Warren itself is significantly damaged by the current visitor levels that we receive. Increasing that through the shoehorning in of all these units would potentially increase the erosion, the damage to the environment, and I think that the sheer footfall, the waste, the additional thing would put an unfair burden. And with the best will in the world, S106 contributions only mitigate; they don't actually address the problem. The other aspect, and another hugely concerning one, is that the drainage side of it, specifically the comment from our own officer, the site falls within the Dawlish critical drainage area as defined by the Environment Agency, which means that catchment needs to be protected from development measures. That's quite a significant statement. Where we have already acknowledged that there are difficulties with drainage and that there are difficulties with sewage and processing, etc., within the area, significantly increasing development is just going to add to that problem, and it is actually going to be contrary to the Dawlish critical drainage area protection. And specifically, coming back to conditions, and this always does concern me, is that conditions are seen as after the fact. I would have expected, having received the report from the drainage officer, where he notes, I can advise that the applicant has not provided any information in relation to the disposal of surface water. The site will introduce additional impermeable areas compared to the existing situation. The assumption of infiltration drainage should be clarified with appropriate testing and appropriate designs of any proposed infiltration devices and permeable surfaces. One would expect that to be in place before the application comes for consideration, rather than having it as a condition after approval or refusal has been granted. This is key and critical information that is needed to make proper decisions. And on that basis, my recommendation would be to refuse, and I move that.
Thank you. Is that seconded? Yeah, Councillor Parker has put his hand up for that. Okay, I'll ask Anna to come back, but I do have a question myself. I share the concerns expressed about drainage and sewage issues, which may not be as fully answered in what I've read, having heard the representations. But the question I have relates to the habitat regulation contribution. Now, we've got the calculation of the contribution on the basis of the number of units and the number of people that would occupy them, as would be similarly the case if it was new dwellings, and we're all familiar with that. The issue that's come up today that I have to sort of stop and reflect on is the fact that whilst that contribution is what you would normally expect to mitigate from an area close to the Warren, the argument about this green area being lost for recreational use, for dog walking, albeit I know there'll be some walking areas around the periphery of it, I would myself consider that actually increases the pressure on the area of the ex-estuary because of people not having the opportunities to walk around within the site as they previously would. So I'd like an answer to that question as well, because to my mind, it means that what's currently being asked for is not a sufficient amount, given that we've created additional recreational space elsewhere within the vicinity, but here we are losing an area of currently open recreational land. And can I also ask for a response on the point that Councillor Wrigley made under item 4 on the conditions that are proposed, that are suggested, relating to whether a register would be kept and if that would be added in. So can I ask Anna to respond to those issues of the drainage, sewage, and the contributions and so on?
Yes, Chair. In terms of the critical drainage area, there's been a lot of discussions between the applicant and Devon County Council as the lead local flood authority, and subject to the condition they propose, they have no objection to the application. So that would be a pre-commencement condition, which the applicants have agreed to, which would mean they'd need to address all of those points before the development commences on the site. In terms of the payment for the accessory Dawlish Warren, the joint habitat contribution, the payment is calculated. Most holiday units have a discount over the full residential amount, but because of the proximity, there is a multiplier added to this site, which actually brings it back up to what we'd expect for full-time residential use. So that has been addressed within the joint contribution, which is our established way of mitigating that impact. At the moment, the space has a play area on which would be relocated. In terms of the ad hoc use of that space for walking of dogs, there's no planning protection for that. I mean, we would want to see the play space relocated, but obviously you've heard that they use the site for tents and camping and everything else. So it is within the park itself, and it wouldn't, in officer's opinion, justify a refusal for the loss of that space.
Sewage?
In terms of sewage, they will need, obviously, they need to liaise with South West Water in terms of the connection for that. And if there are existing issues, then that would largely be a matter for South West Water to resolve in terms of those existing issues, or any existing issues that exist. So again, officer opinion is that wouldn't justify a refusal of planning permission for the current proposal.
Thank you. Councillor Nuttall.
Oh, and sorry. And
oh,
condition,
sorry. Carry on. Yeah, carry on, Anna.
The proposed register for occupants, yes, that can be included with the proposed condition 4, as has been the case for other parks and other applications of this nature. So yes, that could be included as part of that condition.
Thank you. Councillor Nuttall.
Thank you, Chair. Just very briefly, I'd just like us all to note that Dawlish Town Council resolved unanimously recommending refusal of this application for many reasons set out by yourself, by Councillor Wrigley and others. I just think that's worth noting. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I think the issue we need to address, though, is the sort of robust reasons for refusal that we need to be able to come up with. I think it was it Councillor McGregor who moved refusal, and can we consider what the reasons might be, and then I'll ask the officer to give some response to that, because we need to have some specific reasons.
Despite the lead flood element, I believe that our own flood risk manager, the drainage and coastal manager, highlights the issue as this is a critical drainage area and needs protected from development. And I think that is contrary to the idea of protecting from development. And I think it exceeds the current level, particularly in light of the fact that there is no identified plan to mitigate for drainage on site.
Yeah, I think, can I just stop you on that one? Yeah. The problem would be whether this is normally what the government would be happy to be addressed by a condition, and of course it's condition 5 that is the condition there. So I think we need to have some guidance on whether we're able to use that as a reason for refusal, or whether the condition would enable it to be overridden. I don't know whether Ros wanted to comment on that sort of general way of conditions used.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's useful to read the whole of the response that we've had from the lead local flood authority, and the conditions that they've recommended are really clear that they're not suggesting that we don't know what's going to happen with the drainage here. There's a strategy in place. But what they're requesting through their conditions is some additional technical details that would, it's fairly normal that scheme design reaches a certain level of detail and a certain point up until the point when planning permission is granted for a scheme or a development. And then after that, the technical work continues to get further analysis or further connections and specific site locations known so that the details are understood before the development is implemented. And that's what's happened in this case. So we've had a surface water drainage strategy submitted, and there's been a lot of significant toing and froing between the various technical experts. And on my reading of the consultation responses that we've got, including that from Richard Rainbow, our in-house engineer, there would be no technical support from either from county or from Richard for refusal of this application on drainage grounds. That doesn't mean that you can't refuse it on drainage grounds. Obviously, it just means you need to be really clear and think about whether or not there are any technical reasons for that refusal to be taken forward. Because without that technical support and backup from either our in-house expertise or from Devon County Council, then clearly there would be a serious risk of that being considered as an unreasonable reason for refusal.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor McGregor, do you want to carry on with the other reasons as well, please?
Well, just to return to that one particular point, I think it's worth noting that Councillor Wrigley's input in terms of part of the response that was given is that they were going to pump the water from the site, but into a low level below high tide area, which would again present us with potential further risk of flooding, and it is in the zone 2 flooding area. So from that perspective, I think drainage is still a concern. I note the business planning manager's position on that, but I think that is still a concern. I think also overdevelopment of the site, bearing in mind that it is a previously existing holiday destination and the use of that field currently exists for camping. I think this is an overdevelopment, and I think there are far too many units being shoehorned into the site, and it is quite a considerable overdevelopment, bearing in mind the pressures on drainage and water outfall and surface water.
Okay, thank you. So those are the reasons for refusal, that you would be putting forward the drainage and the overdevelopment.
Yeah.
Okay. Councillor Bradford.
I'm very concerned about all of the wildlife. Mitigation's only reducing the severity of something that's already bad. And we've lost 50% of our wildlife. We've declared an environmental emergency, and I don't think we should be killing off anything else. Also, practically, the rangers, as Councillor McGregor mentioned, they are overstretched now. They've got so much to look after, and I think that's a big consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, nobody else has indicated they wish to speak, so I will therefore take the motion that's before us. That's the motions for refusal for the 2 main reasons being drainage and overdevelopment. So if nobody else is saying anything, we'll have the vote on that now, please. So can I ask Chris to go
Can you
through the roll?
repeat that, please, Mike?
Sorry, the motion before you is for refusal. The reasons being, as outlined by Councillor McGregor, that's drainage and overdevelopment.
Thank you.
So it's for refusal. So if you wish to refuse, you will vote for. Obviously, if you are against refusal, you will vote against.
Thank you.
Okay. Chris, can you go through, please?
Yep, thank you, Chair. Councillor Bradford,
For.
Councillor Bullivant,
Against.
Councillor Clarence,
Against.
Councillor Colclough,
For.
Councillor Cox,
For.
Councillor Hayes,
For.
Councillor Hook,
Against.
Councillor Jeffrey, Councillor Kurzweil. Sorry, Councillor, you're muted.
Sorry, against.
Councillor McGregor,
For.
Councillor Nutley,
For.
Councillor Nuttall,
For.
Councillor Parker,
For.
Councillor Patch,
For.
Councillor Goodman Bradbury,
For.
and Councillor Haynes.
Against.
That's 11-5, Chair.
Yes, that's how I have it. So that is carried. So that application has been refused for the reasons that have been outlined. Okay, as I indicated earlier, I think we need a comfort break. So I would ask that we reconvene. I'll make it about 8 minutes, 7 minutes to. Should we say 12:05? And we'll have to take the register again, the roll call to log everyone back in. Chris, can you deal with the situation if members could turn themselves to mute and turn off their cameras, and then see you back here at 12:05? Chris, I'll make it 5 past. Are you there?
Yes, Chair, I'll turn this off now.
Who's the heavy breather?
Chairman, I'm sorry, but I am here, but it doesn't look as though I am.
Yeah, I can see you on the list, Avril.
Yeah, I am here, but I don't know why, but the camera's not showing me on the screen. But I am here.
Yeah, the camera isn't shown as switched off.
Sorry about that. I don't know what's happened.
Yeah, it's just the background. You've got a background on, Avril.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
It may be that that's causing a problem. I know earlier Phil seemed to be sort of fading into his background and then came back out again. So I don't know whether those are the issues. Is it? If you're able to look at that. Right. Chris, can you take the roll call, please?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Bradford.
Present.
Councillor Bullivant. Councillor Clarence.
Present.
Councillor Colclough.
Present.
Councillor Cox.
Present.
Councillor Goodman Bradbury.
Present.
Councillor Haynes.
Present.
Councillor Hayes.
Present.
Councillor Hook.
Present.
Councillor Jeffrey.
Present.
Councillor Kurzweil.
Present.
Councillor McGregor.
Present.
Councillor Nutley.
Present.
Councillor Nuttall.
Present.
Councillor Parker.
Present.
And Councillor Patch.
Present.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, that's everyone.
Did Councillor Bullivant leave the meeting, or is he just not back? It seems like he's still got his camera off.
There we are. He's just
Oh, there we go.
reappeared. Okay, so Councillor Bullivant's present as well. All right, so that's done then, Chris, is it?
Yeah, thanks,
Okay,
Chair.
thank you. Right, if we move on then, we're on to item E under 5, that's Shell Cove House at Dawlish. We have got 2 public speakers on this one. So if we could have them in, and then I'll ask Arta to start the presentation. So can we have the public speakers admitted, please? Right, I can see both supporter and objector are down on the list there. I think if I could ask them both, please, to mute their microphones, and then I'll ask Arta to go through the presentation. Okay, I can see them both on screen. Okay. Right, okay, Arta, can you go through the presentation, please? Okay, Arta, can you go through the presentation, please?
Yes,
Sorry, I
thank you,
couldn't
Chair.
hear that.
Can you hear me okay?
Sorry, I couldn't hear that.
Can
I
you
can hear
hear me
whoever-
now?
Yes, I can hear whoever that was.
Hello.
Yes, I can hear you
Yeah.
very loudly.
Yeah. I'm just going to share my screen. Oh, sorry, Chris. Can you just make me a co-host?
There you go. Thanks, Arthur.
There you go. Thanks. Okay. Cheers. Just scroll up on that one. So can everyone see that fine?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so this is an application for formation of 6 new dwellings at Shell Cove House. This is the site location, so they'll be located in the area where former tennis court was. The application is part of a larger redevelopment. As you can see within the blue line, there is a major scheme approved in 2016 that involves 2 new apartment buildings and cottages along the Old Teignmouth Road. So this is just an aerial photo. So you can see the proximity to the cliff and the arrangement of the dwellings neighbouring. The site will utilise the access that's consented under the 2016 major application for their neighbouring development. So this is a block plan. Members might be aware that there was a previous consent on this site in 2015 for same number of dwellings. However, this is a new application. It's a complete change of design towards a kind of more contemporary terraced housing design. The layout slightly changed. We've got introduction of carports to the front of the dwellings, where previously the parking was located to the east of the site. So the buildings have been set back to accommodate the carports, and also with the carports offer additional parking spaces. I think it's a move from 7 to 12 parking spaces from the previous consent. So here are the elevations. That's your front elevation. It's a 1.5 total height increase on the previous site. This is including the lantern light above the staircase, but it's only 0.9 meters increase in height to the height of the main roof. So you can see on the western side, the buildings are 2-story, so these will be facing the neighbouring properties and the carports. And then on the eastern side, it is proposed for the ground to be excavated to accommodate a lower ground floor, which will come out into the gardens as seen on the elevations. So these are just the kind of side elevations. So you can see the carport, the existing boundary wall, which is being retained, and this is roughly where the entrance is going to be. And this is just the other side of the dwellings. Here you can see a section for the site which shows relationship to Bredonton House and Papillon, which are the closest properties to the site. So we've got a rough separation distance between this house and the new development of around 23 to 25 meters. And here are just some pictures from the site. So this is looking into the site from roughly where the access is going to be. So this is the northeast corner we can see the relationship of the neighbouring properties on Bretton House slightly set above, looking over the site, and Papillon, which is located behind the wall here. And this is from the northwestern corner. So along this wall is where the carports will be located. We can't see Bretton House in this picture there, but it's kind of roughly located somewhere behind that vegetation there. So with this one, there's a recommendation for approval with a range of conditions covering the cliff stability in conjunction working with Network Rail, and a Section 106 contribution for affordable housing.
Right, thank you. Right, thank you. I've got an echo on your end, Arthur. Thank you. Right, we've got the public speakers. First of all, the objector, please. That's Gareth. So if I could ask Gareth, you have this is a full application, so it's 3 minutes each on that. And when you start.
Thank you. So the huge risk with the cliff on this site hasn't been adequately considered. The only submittal is the 2013 Pegasus report, and this is for a different proposal with no detailed assessment, and it fails to document multiple failures on the site. It is only based on visual assessment and generic engineering, and I consulted a geotechnical engineer to review the report, and he told me this was inadequate to determine risk. There is no detailed scientific investigation of risk from the cliff or the development's impact upon this. New cliff evidence was not considered in the previous application and has not been given adequate consideration for this application. This was dismissed on the basis of Network Rail's lack of comment, yet on the previous application they stated, Network Rail has serious concerns this proposal, if permitted, could destabilise the cliff, as the area concerned has a high profile of cliff failures, and nothing has changed. Direct quotes from this evidence refer to tension cracks, very weak, poor condition of the rock, significant risk of large-scale slope failure, poor geotechnical characteristics, failure of up to 2,500 tons of material. The geology of the cliffs is such that further falls remain likely. A large-scale slope failure of the upper section is a likely event, extremely weathered in the upper third of the cliffs, and extremely weak and weathered ground conditions. This is the most detailed information we have. We know the cliffs are at risk. We know from local studies that future more severe weather events will place greater risk, but we don't know what the cumulative impact of building close to the cliff edge will be. Whereas the geotechnical document which says building a development close to the cliff with a history of failures is okay. Where's the guarantee that no one will lose multiple meters of their property to the cliff in the future? And last year, 50 meters to the east of the site, this happened. We do not know when or to what extent, but at some point the cliff will have a failure. And at what point is this acceptable? Someone could buy a house and lose part of their garden or worse in the future. And are you signing this off and saying that that's not going to happen? Or are you satisfied that as it might happen in 5 to 10 years or more, that makes it okay? I've spent 12 years working for a major international engineering consultancy, and if that information came to light on a project, it would not only be properly assessed, but we would be likely be looking at sites elsewhere. And the key amenity is the coastal aspect. We can argue about view versus amenity, but it is a fact that this is the main enjoyable feature and reason for siting properties here. The developer themselves is advertising on this basis, and the development will destroy this for neighbouring properties with a no compromise. The development is detrimental to the character of the area, too high density for the small site and too imposing. It is 1.5 metres higher, 25% greater in built-up area. It uses more asphalt and less green landscaping than the previous proposal. The north-facing windows are 4 times larger. This is invasive to privacy regardless of arguments around angle of view. It should also be considered alongside the cumulative impact of the developer's proposal for large flats on the adjacent plot. This is overdevelopment in a scenic setting. And whilst due to the cliff it is ludicrous to build here, there is compromise to lessen the impact. A 1 or 2 story development maintaining a cutaway ground floor limits its imposing nature.
Yeah, that's time.
Thank you. Carry on. Finish your sentence, please.
Okay, break up the number of properties, provide more open green space, reduce asphalt, and reduce the north-facing window size. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, can I ask now the supporter, please, to unmute, and then you'll be 3 minutes from when you start. See if I can see you've unmuted. Okay, so start when you're ready.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chair.
My name is Georgina Nelson. I'm a chartered town planner and agent for the application representing Poppy Developments. Residential development on this site is acceptable as it is within the settlement limits of Dawlish. The application site also already benefits from full planning permission for 6 houses. The consideration today is therefore essentially a revised proposal for the same number of homes. We believe the current proposal is an improvement compared to the scheme with planning permission. In terms of residential amenity, the proposal has been designed sensitively to the 3 existing surrounding dwellings, Bredenton House, Shrimp Lodge and Papillon. It is important to be aware that this proposal locates the 6 new homes further away from Bredenton House and Shrimp Lodge than the site's existing planning permission, as the new homes are located 14 metres away from the boundary, whereas the permitted scheme located the houses adjacent to the boundary. Separation distances between Bredenton House and Shrimp Lodge and the proposal are therefore increased over the separation distances in the permitted scheme. A distance between the proposal and the existing Bredenton House of over 23 metres is achieved, which is in excess of the suggested 20 metres as set out in the design guide. In respect of Shrimp Lodge, this is increased to over 40 metres. Given these measurements, it is considered that no detrimental impact to the outlook of neighbouring properties is caused. Also, as Bredenton House is elevated and orientated to the northeast, rather than being parallel to the proposed, this helps minimise direct overlooking. For Papillon, this property is 10 metres from the proposal's northeast elevation. A boundary wall separates the 2 properties, and the height of the proposed is similar. The only opening that will overlook Papillon will have obscure glazing to prevent any potential minor overlooking. In respect of cliff stability and the objecting parties' concerns, Network Rail has been consulted multiple times for this current application and for the previous planning permission. For this application, they have been consulted twice, most recently in December last year. Their response time and time again has confirmed that there is no objection and that there are no additional comments to make from their initial response, and that the conditions proposed are sufficient to facilitate the development. There are no technical objections relating to cliff stability from Network Rail or any other professional body. Appropriate monitoring of the cliff during the construction and the life of development will be enforced by a condition. To conclude, I'd like to politely remind members that view is not considered to be a planning consideration. Regard should only be given to outlook when weighing up the planning balance, and given the comfortable separation distances, which are in excess of guidance, it is considered that there is not a detrimental impact to the outlook of the neighbouring properties. There are not any technical objections to the proposal. There is also the contribution of £237,608 for off-site affordable housing, which has been agreed. I politely ask that in accordance with your officer's recommendation, you vote to approve this application. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Okay, we don't have any ward members present. This item was requested to go to committee by, I think it was the town council. I do have a question myself, which relates, I mean, to me, the only issue that raised any concern was the cliff stability, which obviously was raised by the first public speaker, but was also addressed just now by the agent for the applicant. I'm having listened to that, I would be content if our officer could confirm that obviously Network Rail are themselves happy with what's proposed, and there is the condition number 18, which is obviously for ongoing monitoring of the stability of the cliff, because we're talking here about a cliff that is down to the railway, not down to the sea, but we know of issues of cliff instability further back up down the line in the direction of Teignmouth, which obviously have caused problems in the past. So Arta, can you just clarify the position with Network Rail, please, on the cliff stability?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So as the supporter said, so we've consulted Network Rail twice on this. Originally, they came back with a range of conditions, and then obviously bearing in mind some of the objections that came in mind, bringing some material forward, I gone to Network Rail, pointing out those objections to ensure that they are happy with the cliff issue on the site. They came back with no further comments. So the conditions, so there is a monitoring cliff condition. There's also a range of conditions in terms of the drainage to ensure that any of those works don't affect the stability, and also construction management plans and management plans to ensure that during construction that the cliff is being monitored and is stable.
Right, thank you. I've got a couple of people wish to speak. Councillor Goodman-Bradbury.
Thank you. Although not the ward member, obviously a near neighbour, and I do recall at the town council in Dawlish, the main objection that was before us was the fact that Network Rail had real concerns about the cliff and wanted the positioning and the size of the 3-storey buildings as they were in the past. They basically put the main objection to us. So hence the concerns from the town council. These concerns have been withdrawn in this at this time, and from that point of view, I'm reassured as well that there's a programme for monitoring the stability of the cliff. Of course, it's in Network Rail's interest to do exactly that. As you rightly said, Mike, the railway literally does run at the bottom of their garden from that point of view. I see the improvements that have been made for the nearby residents and the properties. There were concerns about overlooking, but the separation of the actual buildings and the carport does put more distance, and I was reassured to hear 23 to 25 metres separation with the properties from that point of view. I'm more comfortable with this prospect and this item, and I would move that we approve as set out. Thank you.
Is that seconded? I'll second that. If okay, put me down to second that one then, please. Right, Councillor Hook.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, again, we need to bear in mind that this has got a planning history and a previous permission on this site. I wanted to sort of raise another point though. I'm disappointed that in the conditions there's no consideration of how the residents that live in these houses will be encouraged to use sustainable travel means. We do have a policy in our local plan, S9, that refers to sustainable travel considerations. One of those said that we should support infrastructure for electric vehicles, and this is becoming standard now, I think, in most permissions we give for residential and other development, and it should be standard, especially in this type of development where the carports are actually slightly distant from the houses. So if residents had electric cars in these properties, it wouldn't be easy for them to charge them. So I mean, it might be, you know, some sort of condition that says they must be made EV ready, even if we're not actually putting in the charging facilities at the moment, that if a person decides they would like to charge an EV car, they can just quickly install the necessary facility to do that. So I'd like to ask for that to be added. And also, of course, cycles. I'm not seeing anywhere there that's suggesting where people might store a cycle if they had one. And may I suggest that since the parking provision is quite generous, that one of those carports could actually quite simply be a cycle store with sort of lockable compartments within it. So I'm wondering whether that could be included as a condition. Other than that, I'm happy with what's proposed.
Okay, I'll ask the officer to comment on that. I'm not sure about the cycling if it wasn't in the existing plan. I know we've talked about it for the plan moving forward, but Arto or Ros, if not, on the sort of general policy implications of that.
So in terms of the cycling, it might have not been clear from the floor plans, but the carports what they're also allowing is at the back of the carports there is a storage compartment included for the use of the occupiers of the individual dwellings. So that will give the opportunities to store cycles or whatever the occupants choose to put there, but there is that possibility.
And the vehicle charging question?
If I can take that one, I would expect and anticipate that these carports would have some form of lighting in them. So I would have thought that would be a simple condition that we could attach, and I'd be happy and would support and endorse the inclusion of that condition.
Okay, thank you. Right, Councillor McGregor.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question. In terms of the swept path analysis that's been done for the site for waste vehicles, because they're coming off the road into a small development and then back out onto the road. What are the measurements that have been notified to the waste team in terms of the amount of space for the vehicles to get through and the amount of manoeuvring room once they're in there?
Walter?
So I don't know off the top of my head, but the swept path analysis was actually requested by our waste team, and they've given the kind of standard dimensions, which I then communicated to the agent. And then once I've received the swept path analysis, that went to our waste team, and they were happy that there's been kind of sufficient simulation for the size of the vehicles for them to be happy with that. But I can come back to you on the exact measurements.
If you could, because the question I've got for that would be, does it also meet the requirements of the building regulations B5, which has a certain size, width and manoeuvring area for fire brigade vehicles, which is actually larger than the vehicle requirements for the waste team?
Well, if it doesn't meet building regulation requirements, one presumes that they wouldn't actually be able to proceed with it, and they'd have to come back with any amendment. I mean, I don't know whether Ros wants to comment on the sort of overall principle of that. I know, Councillor McGregor, you're very mindful of a recent one that we went to in Teignmouth, which clearly was demonstrated to be the case. But this one, I think, as a sort of more of a new build, it's not likely to have those problems, and our own team have looked at it. Ros, did you want to comment on that, please?
I'd just reiterate the point that you've made there, Chair. The access to the site has been considered by our waste team and considered acceptable, and likewise by Devon County Council. We try not to get too involved as a planning team in whether or not things would pass building regs, but clearly there's no point in us granting planning permission for something that wouldn't pass building regs. So we do our best to be mindful of these things, but we are also guided by government that we shouldn't overlap with those regimes. In terms of access to the site, the bin lorries won't be going into this application site itself. On the block plan, there is a bin collection point. So the vehicles won't be expected to get into and manoeuvre within the site itself. They'll be accessing the overall site, coming to the bin collection point and then going away. And there are bin storage facilities shown on the site layout plan, so that it's an easy move for the residents to take their bins out to the bin collection point. None of the distances are very large. I appreciate that the guidance in relation to access and fire regulations has changed and continues to change in response to tragedies such as Grenfell, and it is something that we all need to be increasingly mindful of. But in this instance, I certainly don't see that there's any reason for refusal connected to whether or not the fire appliances would be able to get into this site or not.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Patch.
Thank you, Chair. From the images of the development, it does look like a very attractive development, I must say, for this type of development. My attention was drawn to the points the objector made regarding the potential risk in terms of cliff stability. And I might be asking for details that's not readily to hand, but it does just strike me that particularly given the changes in weather patterns we're getting, where we're getting lots of rain, and I know we've got a lot forecast this next couple of days, but I just wonder whether the analysis of the sort of structural risk to that area in the cliff has that taken into account the sort of increasing sort of risk of heavy rainfall over extended periods of time? As I say, I'm not sure whether that information is available, but if it is, it would be interesting to know.
Arthur, have you any detail on that?
If I can comment generally, Chair, if we just consider, and I know that it's not an application that's before us now, but members are familiar with the work of the South West Rail Resilience Partnership through the applications that we've had before us in relation to projects at Marine Parade and Coast Guard Colonnade in Dawlish, where the Network Rail planning team is acutely aware of the increasing storminess that we may well be facing as a consequence of climate change, that we anticipate facing as a consequence of climate change. So I do think that Network Rail as a whole and their planning team and therefore their consultation team, as all professional planners, are mindful of the changing climate that we live in. Whether it is set out specifically in those terms within the relevant documentation or not is not something I can answer. But what we do have is a really clear consultation response from Network Rail that says that subject to the application is the conditions that are included in our recommendation. And some of the more technical ones we also included as an appendix to this report as well, just because they are non-standard, and so to make sure that we and you understand what it is that is proposed. There is no objection from Network Rail. Whether it is explicit in the paperwork or not about the increased rainfall that would be going into that cliff stability analysis or not, I don't know, but I don't know whether Arta has been able to pull anything up on that, but in general terms, I think we're all comfortable that sufficient technical analysis has been undertaken to date.
Yeah, I concur with that. I don't think there's any need for any more from Arta on that. It's been answered already. Okay, so we've got the motion that was proposed by Councillor Goodman-Bradbury. Councillor Goodman-Bradbury, are you happy to incorporate that one additional thing, which was the vehicle charging that was suggested by Councillor Hook and agreed to by Councillor Eastman? Would you be happy to incorporate that?
Absolutely, yeah. That's a real positive step, so of course.
Yeah, and as seconder, I would as well. So there's no one else indicated to speak. So the motion then is approval as set out with that one additional point. So can I ask Chris to go through? You'll be voting for approval or against. Chris.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Bradford.
For.
Councillor Bullivant.
For.
Councillor Clarence.
For.
Councillor Colclough.
For.
Councillor Cox. Councillor Cox.
For.
Councillor Hayes.
For.
Councillor Hook.
For.
Councillor Jeffrey.
For.
Councillor Kurzweil.
For.
Councillor McGregor.
For.
Councillor Nutley.
For.
Councillor Nuttall.
For.
Councillor Parker.
For.
Councillor Patch.
For.
Councillor Goodman-Bradbury.
For.
And Councillor Haynes.
For.
That's unanimous,
Okay.
Chair.
Yeah, thank you. We've all agreed. Thank you very much for that. Right, so if I could ask for the two public speakers to be moved to the waiting room, please. And then before we go on to the next item, which is 5F, the TPO, we have a supporter, well, not a supporter, an objector, I beg your pardon, an objector in as much as objecting to the TPO that needs to be admitted. And I see that the objector is with us somewhere.
Chair, I can see him with us now. His camera's on.
Right, yeah, I was looking. I found him on the participants list, but couldn't. Oh, there we are. Yes, I can see the objectors of the order now, and also Councillor Malone will be wishing to speak on this one, so he's already there. So, if I could ask Mr. Sample, we'll go through the officer's presentation first, and then I'll invite you to speak. So could you please mute your microphone in the meantime?
See him with us now.
That's it. Thank you. Okay. So it's Mark Wadhams to give the presentation, please.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So I'll just share my screen. Can you see that okay?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So this report concerns the confirmation or otherwise of the District of Teignbridge 17A South Road number 2 Tree Preservation Order 2020. The tree preservation order itself protects a group of 2 Monterey pine trees that are located in the front garden of 17A South Road. The tree preservation order was made on the 21st of July 2020, and the provisional protection will cease on the 21st of January 2021 if it's not confirmed. An original tree preservation order was made on the 27th of January 2020 following a conservation area notification informing the council that the applicant wished to fell the 2 trees. Owing to the COVID restrictions at the time, the original tree preservation order wasn't confirmed. So the tree preservation order we're discussing today was made to replace it and to ensure the continuing protection of the trees. The trees are highly visible and contribute to the visual amenity of the area, and the loss of the trees would be detrimental to the wider conservation area. Collectively, the trees have an amenity rating of 16. The suitable benchmark for inclusion within a tree preservation order is generally regarded as 15. We've received 1 objection to the making of the tree preservation order. So if I summarise the objection, it's as follows. The original conservation area notification did not attract any objections from members of the public. The trees or section of the trees may fall or fail, and a large limb from a tree fell in the recent past, causing significant damage to the applicant's property. In response to the objections, whilst it's noted that no objections were received to the original conservation area notification, as stated previously, the trees are highly visible and contribute to the visual amenity of the area. Accordingly, the preservation order was made. The objection was accompanied by a brief tree report that discussed the condition of the trees. The tree report was undertaken from the ground, and no climbing inspection was undertaken. The inspection suggested that there's an area of decay of approximately 20 metres of one of the trees. However, without a climbing inspection, it's impossible to actually confirm the presence of the decay, the extent of the decay, or whether the decay has any structural influence on the trees. And I couldn't notice any significant areas of decay. So I consider that there's no evidence that's being put forward that the trees are liable to fail. With regard to the final objection, the council is obviously very sympathetic to the distress that was caused by the failure of another tree that isn't included within this tree preservation order. However, as it wasn't included with this tree preservation order, it doesn't appear particularly relevant in considering whether this order should be confirmed. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We could go back to the normal screen. Thank you. Okay. Right. Can I invite then the objector, which is Mr. Sample, I believe, to speak? And you've got 3 minutes. So if you'd like to unmute your microphone, and then you can speak to us.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Right, so thank you very much. Okay, so I'd like to talk about the 3 trees, obviously, and object. The main reason for this, or there's a couple of reasons. When the Beast of the East came back on the 2nd of March 2018, as the officer said, a large Monterey pine over 100 and probably about 110, 120 foot crashed through our house and nearly killed the three of us. Myself, my wife, my daughter. We moved out, obviously the house was rebuilt. These trees that I'm referring to, the two Monterey pines, are of similar age. The age of these trees must be between 85 to 90 years. I understand that the average age for a tree of this ilk is 80 to 90 years, and the height of it ranges from 90 to 110 feet. Okay, my main concern is that they're both built on steep banks, and whereas they are very visual from the roadside, if you look from the garden side, should those trees fall or fail, the fall range is something that I wish you to consider considerably, because the house is some 30 foot from those trees, and the neighbouring apartments in Church Path are probably 60 foot away. So should these trees fail, not only could they cause considerable damage and loss of life to further people, it's something that is being overlooked, I feel, from the officer's point of view. Now, if you also look at the trees, okay, from the garden, you'll note that there are two unions in those trees, and some of those unions are rubbing against other trees, which would obviously cause them stress, okay, and considerable, could be damaging high winds. I'd also like to say that the visual immunity of South Road has somewhat changed over the last few years, with developments taking place just up the road and potentially across in the neighbouring fields. So I don't think it's unreasonable for me to ask the council to reconsider my application to remove one tree, have one tree pruned, and the beech tree that overhangs my neighbour's property needs pruning back, because again, growth takes place. That's my case. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, if I could go to the ward member now. I know Councillor Bradford has declared an interest, so she's not going to speak on this. But Councillor Malone has asked to speak, so can I ask him please to speak now?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, I'm not going to speak for the changing environs of these trees, because obviously I and my party don't want those environs to change. But having visited the property, which I think you need to appreciate the topography of the site, it is clear that the house is very much at the mercy of the trees above it. I mean, it's not as if you've got a house here and you've got a tree X meters distant from it. These two Monterey pines, as I understand they are, growing out of a precipitous slope, which itself begins 1 or 2 stories above the base of the house below it. So as you stand on the pavement, you know, you're at the same level or not far off the top of the house, and you can easily surmise that if a tree were to fail and fall that distance onto the house, it would probably go, it would have to go down the slope. That's the only way it can go, and if it hit the house, it would go through it like cheese wire. I believe Mr. Sample when he says that you know, he would not want to remove a tree without any good reason, but I don't think he should have to live his life in fear of it either. I mean, bear in mind that a number of Monterey pines were planted at the same time before the house was there. And of these trees, one apparently healthy one failed catastrophically, as he said, in March 2018, and another one has died and been removed. I believe Mr. Sample's been advised by his expert that these trees are all of the same vintage, and the two he's talking about are sort of approaching their terminus. So whereas normally we want to let trees bow out in their own time, I'm not sure that's an option here, because the deterioration is a very clear danger to the life and limb below it. And I would wonder what the council's liability would be if the removal and pruning was refused while we're aware of these factors. The risk factor has been calculated by Mr. Sample's expert, I believe, and I believe I don't know what the exact figure is, but I think he's put it within a risk category that would require remedial works. If that's the case, I would think we need to either question the recommendations of the expert, and if we have no reason to do this, we should accept that it is a hazard, given the situation of the tree above the house, which I think is actually an extraordinary case. Thanks. That's everything.
Thank you. Okay. Well, I think we've got a time constraint here. Before, I mean, clearly there are certain issues that still need to be sorted out, as far as I can see. I think Mark Wadham said that the current order expires, I think it was in a couple of days' time, and members will note that the options before us under 6 in the report is either to confirm the order unmodified, to confirm the order in a modified form, or to not confirm it. And certainly I wouldn't want to not confirm any protection in the sort of short term, because clearly it needs to be demonstrated to me. I feel that the trees, if there is any aspect of them that is unsound and works need to be done, then that needs to be demonstrated by a survey actually involving the climbing and not just from the ground, as was outlined by Mark Wadhams. So I feel that we'll need to have some sort of order in place after the next couple of days, so that those issues of concern can be further investigated. But I'll ask, I've got one other speaker wishing to speak. I'll ask them to speak. It's Councillor Nutley.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, I mean, we've had very similar issues in Ashburton, where we had one of these trees crash down across some units, causing extensive damage. And there's another tree that I've been on about this group of trees for some time now, and some have been removed. There's one remaining tree that was recommended not to be felled at the time. They had an independent tree surgeon inspect it and recommended that it should be removed. And our tree officer, Dominic Scallon, has now agreed that it is going to be removed. These trees are huge, and like we're saying, in the vicinity where this particular tree that the objector is mentioning, it will, I've based on this, on the loss of life and all the rest of it, which is quite feasible. So as I say, in this case, I mean, I would go with the objector and say that this tree needs to be removed. Thank you.
I think there's 2 trees, but anyway, Councillor Hook.
Thank you, Chair. I tend to go along with your opinion, and I think we can all sympathise with the tree falling on your house and having to move out, and I'm sure really sympathise with that situation and the fear that the trees that remain create. But my feeling is that, as you say, Chair, that we need to continue the protection for now, and then it's for the Mr. Sample to demonstrate, I believe, can make another application for either felling or pruning to deal with any situation that the tree has, or decay, etc. And that needs to be proven. But for the time being, we need to continue the amenity protection that is provided by the TPO, because these are significant trees in the landscape. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bullivant.
Thank you. I have concerns that the trees have an expected lifespan of between 80 and 90 years, and that's available on the internet. You can find that. If these trees are approaching their age, and the history of failure on these trees tends to be catastrophic, that yes, you can survey it, but in the period between a survey and a branch or a limb falling or the tree failing, you don't know what's going on. There are significant risks associated with allowing them to stand past their expected lifespan. And for that reason, I would be in favour of allowing remedial works or removal of a tree if necessary.
Thank you. Well, that could happen even if the tree was subject to the protection, and indeed it was obviously subject to a conservation area application. So if it can be demonstrated that the tree is dangerous, then obviously such works could still happen. Councillor McGregor.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of the tree that failed previously and dropped a limb, that tree is noted by the tree officer as not being included in the conservation order. So that tree could by all reasonable means be removed from the equation. Trees themselves, generally speaking, you can look at a tree, you can climb a tree, you can do whatever you like to it. It will appear healthy, and they can still drop a limb for a number of reasons. They can drop a limb from the weather being too dry, the weather being too wet, the limb being too heavy. There are lots of reasons why trees drop limbs. It doesn't necessarily mean that the whole tree is at risk. And I think it's in terms of Councillor Nutley's point about the ones in Ashburton, they had significant flaws in their growth pattern, which meant that they had split trunks at the base. So they were a different type of risk, and these trees don't appear to follow that same pattern. So from my perspective, I would probably follow your lead on this one, Chair, in terms of what you've suggested so far. And I think what we need to do is perhaps look at this with a little bit more detail and a little bit more closely. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Colclough.
Yes, Chairman, I agree with the previous speaker. I agree with your sentiments as well. I think we should take steps to preserve these trees until we've done further investigation. We've got the views of our own arboriculturalist. I think we should listen to that. And in the meantime, it's easy to chop a tree down. Once it's gone, and there's years of growth here. So I think we've got to be very careful that we're doing the right thing all round. So I'm very happy that a TPO should be put on it while further investigation is done.
So would you propose confirming the TPO
unmodified? I will propose that.
Okay, so it's been proposed, confirm the TPO unmodified. I'd second that. Councillor McGregor?
I was going to second that.
Right, okay, thank you. Right, anyone else wishing to speak? Nobody else, in which case, can I ask Chris to take the vote then, please, which is the first one on the list under options under 6, that the committee confirm the TPO unmodified. Chris.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Bradford?
No, she's declared an interest.
Oh, thanks. Councillor Bullivant?
For.
Councillor Clarence?
Against.
Councillor Colclough?
For.
Councillor Cox?
For.
Councillor Hayes?
Against.
Councillor Hook?
For.
Councillor Jeffrey?
Against.
Councillor Councillor Kurzweil?
For.
Councillor McGregor?
For.
Councillor Nutley?
Against.
Councillor Nuttall?
Against.
Councillor Parker?
Against.
Councillor Patch?
Against.
Councillor Goodman Bradbury?
For.
And Councillor Haynes?
For.
That's 8-7, Chair, in favour.
Yeah, that's what I had written as well. So 8 for, 7 against. So that's carried. So the tree preservation order is confirmed unmodified. Thank you. That's item 5 completed. Item 6, of course, has been removed earlier, which takes us on to item 7, the appeal decisions for noting. I think one particular notable one there. Anything that you wish to say on those at all, Ros?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just to note in particular the Moorwood application, which is number 1 on the list, which was the application for a temporary log cabin for equine purposes, so to support a new business, a new equine business on the outskirts of Ipplepen. That appeal was allowed, and we also had a cost award in relation to that one, which I think the total costs were in excess of £7,000. So I just wanted to highlight that to members.
Thank you. So members, if you get a temporary request for temporary buildings for an agricultural activity, then it might well be worth your while looking back at the details of that particular application. Okay, and as you heard, costs awarded on that one. Okay, I think the rest were fairly straightforward, and that was one that the committee overturned the officer recommendation, you'll note as well. Right, and that was in the days before we had the recorded vote, so obviously we can't remember, it was too long ago as to who might have voted which way. Right, that then is...
Chair, I have my hand raised.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see it there. Councillor Patch, yes.
Just regarding your comment about future applications and agricultural use, can we have it confirmed that my belief was that equine use is different from agricultural use? So the remarks you've made about future uses, applications for agricultural use, I'm not sure that would apply in that case, but perhaps we could have some clarification.
Well, I mean, any future use, equine, agriculture or whatever that you might feel a bit dubious about, all I was suggesting was that you looked at that appeal decision. That's all, you know, just to sort of in some way inform what decision you come to. I didn't want to get into any sort of nitty-gritty detail on that. Okay. Right, okay, thank you. The other person who's got their hand up is oh no, it's gone. Right, okay, nobody else wishing to ask anything on those. Right, in which case, that's the end of today's agenda. So thank you all very much. And I look forward to seeing you all in the near future. Okay, so feel free to log off and cheerio.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you.
Cheerio.
Thank you.